At my sister's birthday, she trashed my gift and said, "This isn't an iPhone, you're so cheap." My dad shouted, "You're useless." So I cut the $500 payment I used to pay them, but later found out they stole my inheritance to buy her a car, so I took my revenge. Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Sup, Reddit. My sister trashed my $400 gift in front of her friends and said, "I expected an iPhone 15 Pro." My dad backed her up, yelling I'd never done anything for the family, even though I paid their emergencies for years. So I cut them off. Then I found out they stole my inheritance. Now they're crying because I'm suing them. Here's how it went down. I'm 30 male, a union welder from Capitol Hill, Seattle. Make decent money, around $110,000 with overtime. Been hauling my butt to family gatherings in Tacoma every weekend since trade school. Because that's what good sons do, right? Wrong. Tiffany's 32nd birthday changed everything. Mom called saying I had to come to my sister's party at our parents' place. Drive took an hour with Seattle traffic in my truck, but I showed up with a gift like always. An expensive leather bag I knew she wanted. Cost me 3 days of wages after taxes, but family's family. Their place reeked of cheap outlet candles. Tiffany's friends showed up in matching Lululemon, sipping mimosas and posing for Instagram. Nate texted asking if I was still coming to the Seahawks game. I told him I was stuck. He said, "Thought you were done with that." Your call. Dad actually acknowledged my existence when I walked in, which was rare. He's one of those guys who thinks showing approval makes you soft. So hearing anything positive felt weird. Should have known something was up. The man spent my entire childhood acting like praise would turn me into some kind of weakling. Everything went fine during lunch. Dad complained about his blood pressure medication costing too much. Mom talked about the neighbor's messy divorce drama. Tiffany's husband, Adam, tried discussing real estate with me like he wasn't 6 months behind on his mortgage. Tiffany kept checking her phone every 2 minutes like she was expecting an important call from the president. Tiffany's friends were the usual suspects. Suburban moms who think having a Range Rover makes them important. They kept talking about their kids' private school tuition and upcoming trips to Cabo. Meanwhile, I've still got metal dust under my nails from a 12-hour shift yesterday. These women spend more on their weekly nail appointments than most people make in a day. Then came gift time. Tiffany opened presents from her friends, expensive stuff from Nordstrom, spa certificates, designer purses that probably cost more than my monthly truck payment. When she got to mine, I expected at least a thank you for the leather bag. Instead, she looked at it like I'd handed her a bag of garbage from the construction site. Seriously? A purse? Jared, I can literally see the discount sticker you tried to peel off. Her friend Brittany snickered like we were back in middle school. Tiffany held up the bag like evidence in court, turning it so everyone could see the tiny remnant of the price tag I'd missed. My brother makes over $100K a year welding, and this is what he gets his only sister for her 32nd birthday. I thought it would be an iPhone 15 Pro at minimum. I'm standing there watching my sister mock my gift in front of her country club wannabe friends. These women spend more on their weekly grocery runs at Whole Foods than I spend on food in a month. The leather bag was genuine. I'd specifically asked the sales guy to make sure it wasn't some knockoff. The bag cost me $400, Tiffany. Maybe show some $400 for this knockoff? Jared, I spend more than that on my weekly grocery bill at PCC. This is embarrassing. She tossed the bag aside like it was contaminated. That's when I knew this wasn't about the gift. This was about Tiffany showing off to her friends by humiliating me. Classic power play. Same move she'd pulled in high school when she told everyone I worked at McDonald's to pay for my car insurance. Tiffany immediately turned to Dad, putting on her victim act like she'd perfected in childhood. Dad stood up from his recliner and pointed at me like I was 10 years old again. Jared, your sister's right. You make good money now. Stop being cheap with family. The man who made me pay rent at 16, because real men contribute, was lecturing me about being cheap. The same guy who bought Tiffany a car for her 18th birthday while I had to finance my own used pickup. I looked him straight in the eye. Number she got a perfectly good bag that cost me 3 days of wages after taxes. I'm not dropping another grand on an iPhone she doesn't need when she's got a perfectly good phone already. Dad's face went red like it did when his Mariners lost to the Yankees. Don't argue with me in my own house. Your sister deserves better from you. If you can't buy it today, buy it tomorrow. That's final. If you want to spoil her, you go buy it yourself. I don't have extra money lying around for this nonsense. That's when Mom chimed in from her chair, not even looking up from her crossword puzzle. Jared, we raised you better than this. You know what your obligations are to this family. Obligations. Like I signed some contract at birth. The same obligations that apparently didn't apply when I was working 2 jobs to pay for trade school, while Tiffany got her college tuition handed to her. Dad stepped closer, jabbing his finger at my chest like he used to do when I was 12. This family has given you everything and you give nothing back. Nothing. We put a roof over your head for 18 years, fed you, clothed you, and this is how you treat us? The room went dead silent. Tiffany's friends were suddenly very interested in their phones, probably texting about the drama they were witnessing. Adam sat there staring at his drink like a coward, same way he always did when family tension started. Only Tiffany looked pleased with herself, arms crossed with that satisfied smirk. She walked over with this triumphant look. Dad's absolutely right. You're selfish, Jared. You make all that money and act like you don't owe us anything. It's pathetic. The same sister who'd borrowed my car in high school and returned it with an empty tank and a dent she never mentioned. I turned to Mom, thinking she'd at least be reasonable. Say something. Mom finally looked up, but not at me. She stared at her hands and said quietly, "Your father and Tiffany aren't wrong, honey." That was it. My own mother sided against me over a phone. I stood up, grabbed my keys from the coffee table. Adam tried playing peacekeeper with some weak comment about family working things out, but I didn't respond. Just looked at each of them one last time. Mom with her guilt trip eyes, Dad with his entitled glare, Tiffany with her satisfied grin like she'd just won some victory. I walked out, slammed the door, and texted Nate from my truck. Game still on? I'll be there in 30 seconds. Got to the stadium just before kickoff. Nate had saved me a seat in the season ticket section. He splits with 3 other guys from his construction crew. After the game, sitting at a sports bar near the stadium surrounded by other disappointed Seahawks fans, I finally unloaded the whole story. Nate shook his head. Bro, you need to check your bank statements. How much have you actually given these people? Good question. I'd never really added it up. That night, I sat in my apartment, opened my banking app on my laptop. Dad's words kept echoing. This family has given you everything and you give nothing back. If I'd never contributed anything, I would have accepted that. But the numbers told a different story. First paycheck after trade school graduation, Dad demanded I treat the whole family to dinner at Red Lobster for tradition. Tiffany and Dad ordered the most expensive items on the menu, lobster tails, premium steaks, while I paid with money I desperately needed for my security deposit on my first apartment. Since I was 18, I'd covered all my own expenses, plus college application fees, SAT prep, even my high school graduation cap and gown. Got into the welder's apprenticeship program on my own merits through the union hall. But when I told my parents, instead of congratulations, Dad said, "About time you started earning your keep." Why couldn't they help me get started? Because they'd loaned all their savings to Tiffany for some boutique clothing store that lasted 8 months. Never saw that money again, but somehow I was the irresponsible one. So I worked my ass off. Apprentice wages during the day, learning to weld everything from pipeline joints to structural steel, bar back at night cleaning up after drunk college kids, weekend side jobs doing small repair work, until my hands were calloused and my back ached. 4 years of no rest, no social life, no dating. Never once did they ask if I was okay, or notice the burns on my arms. The welding apprenticeship was brutal. 12-hour days with 2,000-degree torches, constant burns, and shaky hands from exhaustion. After that, I still worked nights mopping floors just to afford rent in a sketchy studio. 2 months after that first paycheck dinner, Mom asked for $1,500 for Dad's ER visit. Just acid reflux. I sent $2,000, even took a day off work for his pneumonia follow-ups. She called it a loan, but never brought it up again. When Dad's construction job laid him off during the 2020 slowdown, I heard Mom on the phone with her sister crying how she couldn't cover their monthly expenses. So I started sending $500 every month without being asked. Set up automatic transfers from my checking account. Did that for 3 years straight, $18,000 total. I constantly bailed Tiffany out. Car payments, apartment deposit, even her share of Mom's 60th birthday cruise. That alone was $4,000 over 3 years. Then she asked for $15,000 to start a coffee shop. It folded in 6 months and the money vanished with it. Going through my bank records, I found payments I'd completely forgotten about. Tiffany's kids' birthday parties where I was expected to bring expensive gifts. Christmas where I'd bought everyone's presents because you make the most money. Car repairs for Mom's Honda when it wouldn't pass inspection. Total, I'd given them over 3 years. Over $30,000. and they said I gave nothing back. That night, I canceled Mom's automatic $500 payment and changed my banking password for good measure. But something about this whole situation wasn't adding up. I texted Nate. Something's off. They act like they're desperate for money, but Tiffany drives a new Audi A4. Where's that coming from? His response came back fast. Time to do some digging. The math didn't add up. Adam made maybe $65,000. Tiffany worked part-time at a dentist's office. Yet they drove a $55,000 car, sent their kids to $15,000 per year private schools, vacationed in Hawaii twice a year, and just renovated their kitchen with granite everything. Funny how a guy behind on his mortgage can still afford quartz counters and pendant lighting. Priorities, I guess. Meanwhile, they're hitting me up for grocery money and acting like they're barely scraping by. Next morning at 8 a.m. sharp, Tiffany called. Didn't want to answer but was curious what excuse she'd come up with. She got straight to business with this fake sweet voice, asking me to help with her car payment. $680 for the month. No apology for the birthday humiliation. No acknowledgement of the previous day's drama. Just another demand for money, like nothing had happened. I replied calmly, "You should see a doctor, Tiffany. I think you're very sick." What's that supposed to mean? You seem to have some kind of memory problem. Yesterday you said I never give anything to this family. Today you're asking me for money. That's concerning. She immediately dropped the sweet act and started yelling about how I was being ridiculous. I hung up while she was mid-sentence. She called twice more, but I sent both calls straight to voicemail. That afternoon, I drove to Nate's brother-in-law's office. Guy named Paul who handles civil litigation cases downtown. Straight shooting professional who'd helped Nate with a contract dispute the year before. Told him everything, what I'd been suspecting, how much they'd taken, and how I wanted out for good. Paul took my case for $1,500 retainer. 2 days later, he'd sent Tiffany an official debt collection notice by certified mail demanding repayment of the $15,000 coffee shop loan plus interest. While at Paul's office, I mentioned my suspicions about their finances not adding up. Paul leaned back in his leather chair. "What makes you say that?" I told him about Tiffany's new Audi, their renovated kitchen with the granite island that probably cost $20,000, the expensive private schools for the kids, the Hawaii vacations, all while claiming poverty and hitting me up for cash every month. "Look," Paul said, "I know a guy, former IRS investigator turned private financial investigator. He does background checks on people's assets for divorce cases, business disputes, stuff like that. For the right price, he can find out what's really going on with your family's finances." When Tiffany got the official debt collection letter from Paul, she lost it. She called me furious, yelling, "Are you seriously threatening your own family with legal action over a stupid business loan? I was trying to build something, Jared." I told her calmly, "Pay back the loan, Tiffany. I'm done. Don't complicate things." She scoffed. "You're unbelievable. You make six figures and you're chasing me down over money like some broke dude. Grow up. We have time for courts, if you insist." A week later, a $15,000 cashier's check showed up at Paul's office. No note, no explanation. I recognized the credit union. I called Paul to close that file. But the real investigation was just getting started. 2 weeks after that, my phone blew up with angry messages from my parents about the missing $500 monthly payment. Mom's first message was about needing to pay the electricity and water bills, how she was scared they'd get shut off. Dad escalated quickly with messages about consequences and obligations, how I was abandoning them in their time of need. Finally sent them both one message. "I have decided to stop the monthly financial support. After years of receiving help, you've had enough time to make financial plans. This decision is final." Dad's response came within minutes. 3 paragraphs about how they raised me, and I owed them for 18 years of housing and food. Mom followed up with her standard guilt trip about responsibility and how disappointed she was in the son they'd raised. Meanwhile, Paul's contact was building a financial profile on my family. The first report came in a week later, and what I saw made my blood boil. The investigator had found multiple bank accounts, property records, and business filings. My family had been busier than I thought. There were LLCs registered to Tiffany and Adam, property purchases that didn't match their reported income, and financial moves that painted a very different picture than the poverty story they'd been selling me. But the smoking gun was still coming. 2 weeks after I cut off the money supply, Aunt Aurora called out of the blue, asking me to meet her for coffee. "There's something you need to know," she said, voice serious in a way I'd never heard before. We met at a quiet cafe. Aunt Aurora, Dad's younger sister who'd always been the reasonable one in the family, told me something that made my stomach drop. My grandmother, Dad's mom, had died when I was 19, during my first year of trade school. I'd been close to her growing up. She used to slip me $20 bills when my parents weren't looking and tell me to buy something just for you. But I couldn't afford to fly back for the funeral because I was working 80-hour weeks just to cover apprenticeship program costs, rent, and ramen noodles. What I didn't know was that she'd left me $120,000 in her will, money that was supposed to be split between Tiffany and me, $60,000 each, money I never saw a dime of because I never even knew it existed. The probate filing showed the funds hit your father's account 3 months after she passed, Aunt Aurora explained. Not a single word was said to you. Not then. Not ever. I sat there trying to process what she was telling me. $60,000. When I was 19, that would have changed my entire life. Could have paid for trade school without working nights. Could have gotten a decent apartment instead of that roach-infested studio. Could have bought reliable transportation instead of that junker pickup that broke down every other month. Your father was the executor, she continued. I always assumed he'd given you your share eventually, but at the barbecue last weekend, your mother let it slip that they'd invested it for you because you weren't responsible enough to handle it at 19. And Tiffany told me she deserved the full amount because she had kids to think about, and you were just a single guy with no responsibilities. My hands were shaking with rage. They'd stolen my inheritance and convinced themselves they were doing me a favor. I called Nate immediately after leaving the cafe, told him everything Aunt Aurora had revealed. My buddy Jason works at First Security Bank downtown, he said. He might be able to help trace where that money went if you want to get serious about this. 3 days later, I was sitting in a different coffee shop with Jason, a sharp guy in his early 30s with a finance degree and access to banking databases I couldn't touch. This is off the books, he warned, but what they did sounds seriously messed up. If your aunt's right about the probate records, there should be a paper trail. What Jason found over the next week made my blood boil. There was indeed a paper trail from the probate court showing Dad as executor. He'd received the full $120,000 in July 2015 and was supposed to distribute it according to Grandma's wishes within 90 days. Instead, there were transfers to their personal accounts, to Tiffany's failed boutique, to a down payment on property. They'd stolen my inheritance and then had the nerve to act like I owed them. The timeline was crystal clear. Grandma died in March 2015. Dad received the inheritance money in July. By August, Tiffany had put a down payment on her first condo. By October, my parents had paid off their credit card debt and bought a newer Honda. Meanwhile, I'm working double shifts at a fabrication shop during the day and cleaning office buildings at night just to afford ramen noodles and gas money for my dying pickup truck. I sat staring at the documents Jason had printed out, hands literally shaking with rage. What are my options? Legally, you could sue for the missing inheritance plus 10 years of interest and penalties. It would be messy, but completely winnable, Jason said. But there's another approach if you want something more satisfying. Jason and Nate helped me lay out a plan over the next week, not just to get my money back, but to expose them completely to the extended family and cut them off permanently. You'll need patience, Nate warned. This isn't something you rush. You've got one shot to do this right. The next day, Mom called again about the missing $500, voice full of fake worry about how they were struggling. This time, I answered with a completely different approach. I told her I'd been thinking about what she and Dad said, that family should help each other. I'd been selfish and immature. I was ready to start sending the money again next month and wanted to apologize for Tiffany's birthday. Mom sounded relieved, almost giddy. I'd always been such a good son when I put my mind to it, she said. Family was everything. Actually, I said, I've been doing really well at work. Got promoted to lead welder on the new Amazon warehouse project, thinking about helping Tiffany with the kids' school tuition next year if she needs it. The bait was set. Over the next 3 months, I played the repentant son perfectly, sent a few hundred here and there as a gesture of good faith, showed up at Sunday dinners acting contrite and apologetic, listened to Dad's lectures about family responsibility without arguing, even brought flowers for Mom and expensive wine for their anniversary, all while Jason quietly documented every account, every asset, every financial move they'd made with my stolen inheritance money. When the full investigative report came in, it was worse than I'd imagined. They hadn't just stolen my inheritance. They'd leveraged it to buy rental properties in Tacoma under an LLC registered to Tiffany and Adam. Properties that were generating $7,000 monthly in rental income, while they cried poverty to me every month. The rental properties were the smoking gun. 4 single-family homes in decent Tacoma neighborhoods, each bringing in $1,400 to $2,000 per month. They were making more from my stolen inheritance than most people make at their day jobs, and they were still hitting me up for money. Time to spring the trap. Memorial Day weekend arrived, and Aunt Aurora was hosting her annual barbecue. The whole extended family would be there: uncles, cousins, grandparents on mom's side. Perfect audience for what I had planned. I arrived with Nate, who knew the full plan and was there for moral support. Also brought Jason, who I introduced as a friend from work, but who actually had copies of all the financial documents in his truck. The barbecue was in full swing when I stood up from the picnic table and tapped my water bottle to get everyone's attention. "I'd like to make a toast," I said loudly. "To family." Everyone raised their drinks. Mom and Dad beamed from their lawn chairs, thinking they'd successfully brought their cash cow back into the fold after months of good behavior. "You know," I continued, "family is supposed to be about honesty, trust, looking out for each other. So I wanted to share something I recently discovered that I think everyone should know." I pulled out a folder and started handing copies to key family members: Aunt Aurora, Uncle Tom, my grandfather on mom's side, a couple of cousins who'd always been decent to me. "These are financial records showing what happened to Grandma Elaine's estate after she passed away 11 years ago," I said, keeping my voice steady and matter of fact. "Specifically, what happened to the $120,000 she left to Tiffany and me in her will." The color drained from Dad's face like someone had pulled a plug. Mom started fidgeting with her napkin like she always did when caught in a lie. Tiffany stood up from her chair, but her husband Adam grabbed her arm and pulled her back down. Uncle Tom flipped through the pages, his expression getting darker with each document. Then he looked up at Dad with pure disgust. "Ron, you stole from your own son?" Dad immediately went on the defensive, standing up from his lawn chair with his chest puffed out. "It wasn't stealing," he said loudly. "They were managing my portion until I showed some maturity. Given how I'd been acting lately, they'd made the right call." "Managing it?" I cut in, staying calm. "While I was working 80-hour weeks to pay for trade school and living on ramen noodles, you were using my inheritance to fund Tiffany's failed boutique and buy rental properties?" I handed out more documents Jason had prepared. "Here's the LLC filing for Tacoma Holdings, owned by Tiffany and Adam. And here are the property records for 4 rental houses purchased with my inheritance money. Houses that generate about $7,000 a month in rental income." The backyard fell dead silent, except for the neighbor's lawnmower 3 houses down. Even the kids stopped playing to stare at the adults. Tiffany finally exploded, jumping up from her chair. "I had no right to investigate them," she yelled. "This was invasion of privacy. They were family, not criminals. How dare I embarrass them like this?" Jason spoke up calmly. "Actually, as the legal beneficiary of the estate, he had every right to investigate. And as executor, your father had a fiduciary duty he clearly violated." More silence. You could hear a pin drop. I wasn't done. "For 3 years, you've taken $500 a month from me while crying poverty. Made me feel guilty for not giving back to the family, all while sitting on my stolen inheritance and the income it's been generating." Dad stood up, face purple with rage, jabbing his finger at me across the yard. "Everything they did was for this family," he yelled. "They didn't owe me explanations for their financial decisions. I was an ungrateful brat who'd never appreciated anything they'd done for me." Uncle Tom, who'd been reading through the documents, stood up and pointed right back at Dad. "Sit down, Ron. You've done enough damage for one lifetime." I looked around at my relatives, cousins, aunts, uncles who'd known me since I was a kid. "I'm not here to ruin Aurora's barbecue. Just wanted everyone to know the truth before I cut ties with them permanently. I'll be filing suit next week to recover my inheritance plus 10 years of interest." Tiffany grabbed her purse, practically spitting with anger. "This was all nonsense," she said. "I was destroying the family over money that wasn't even mine anymore. Grandma would be ashamed of me for causing this drama." "Grandma would be ashamed of people who steal from her grandson and then lie about it for 11 years, I replied, still calm. As I turned to leave with Nate and Jason, Aunt Aurora grabbed my arm. "No, Jared, you stay and enjoy the barbecue. The ones who should leave are those who've been stealing from you." She turned to face my parents and Tiffany. "You 3 should be ashamed of yourselves." Tiffany stormed past me toward their car, practically screaming that I shouldn't expect any of them at my wedding or funeral. Adam followed behind her like a whipped dog, not making eye contact with anyone. My parents slunk out behind them, Dad muttering under his breath about disrespectful kids these days, and Mom sobbing dramatically about how I'd ruined everything. The rest of the family stayed. And for the first time in years, I actually enjoyed a family gathering. The family gossip network exploded that evening. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years called to express shock and support. Apparently, Dad and Tiffany had been bragging about their smart investments and business success to extended family for years, never mentioning where the startup capital came from. The lawsuit was filed the following Tuesday. Paul was confident we'd win big. Legal proceedings are boring, so I'll cut to the chase. 3 months after filing, we reached a settlement. They would pay back my full inheritance plus 11 years of interest at 6% annually, totaling just over $190,000. The rental properties would be sold, with proceeds going toward the settlement. If they couldn't pay within 90 days, I'd get liens on their personal property. My parents and Tiffany tried everything to fight it, claimed they'd invested the money for my benefit, and I should be grateful. Said I'd verbally agreed to let them use it during some conversation I definitely never had. Even tried to claim I'd been mentally unstable at 19 and couldn't manage my own finances. Their lawyer was some bargain basement guy who specialized in personal injury cases, not estate law. My attorney, meanwhile, had 20 years of experience with inheritance disputes and came with references from half the judges in King County. None of their excuses worked. The paper trail was too clear. Probate court records, bank transfers, property purchases, LLC filings, everything documented to the penny by investigators who knew what they were doing. During depositions, Tiffany cried like it was her full-time job, said she never meant to hurt me, and assumed Dad had handled everything legally. Dad sat there stone-faced, claiming he did nothing wrong and had every right to manage family money. Mom tried the guilt trip angle, saying they were just trying to protect me from myself. Funny how protecting me looked a lot like robbing me blind. The mediator looked disgusted by the whole situation. After reviewing all the evidence, he told their lawyer privately that this was the most clear-cut case of executor misconduct he'd seen in 15 years. When they finally agreed to settle rather than face trial, he made a point of saying on the record that he'd never seen such obvious financial abuse within a family. The day the settlement check cleared my account, Nate and I went to Metropolitan Grill in downtown Seattle to celebrate. To justice, he said, raising his glass. To consequences, I replied. Used part of the settlement to pay off my truck and put a down payment on a solid 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in North Seattle. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. Garage for my tools, small yard for grilling. The rest went into smart investments. Index funds, some tech stocks, and a bit in real estate trusts, thanks to Nate's advisor. For the first time in my adult life, I had actual financial security. No more living paycheck to paycheck, no more choosing between groceries and gas money, no more staying awake at night worrying about unexpected expenses. Week later, Tiffany called from a number I didn't recognize. She was crying, claiming they had to sell her condo and move back in with our parents because of the legal fees and settlement. The kids were devastated about changing schools. That's not because of me, I said calmly. That's because you got caught stealing and had to face the consequences. She tried the family card, asking if I could find it in my heart to forgive them. The kids were asking why Uncle Jared wouldn't talk to them anymore. Couldn't I think about the children? Forgiveness doesn't mean you avoid consequences for stealing, I told her. Maybe start by paying back all the other money you took from me over the years. She immediately stopped crying, and her voice went cold. I was a selfish person, and always had been, she said. And no wonder no one sticks around me. She hung up. Dad tried next, leaving a rambling voicemail about how I'd destroyed the family and turned everyone against them over money, how I'd embarrassed them in front of the whole extended family and ruined their reputation. Deleted it halfway through. I'd heard enough. Mom sent a long email about how they'd only been trying to protect me from myself, how they knew I wasn't good with money when I was younger and would have wasted the inheritance. She ended with, "A real son would understand we did this out of love." The extended family sided with me entirely. Aunt Aurora actually changed her will to disinherit my father completely, telling him in front of witnesses, "If that's how you treat your children's inheritance, I'm not leaving you a dime of mine." Uncle Tom started inviting me to his monthly poker games with his work buddies. Turns out he'd never liked Dad much anyway. Always thought he was a bully who treated his kids like employees instead of family. My cousins included me in their group chat for the first time in years. The rental properties sold quickly in Tacoma's hot market, generating enough cash to cover the full settlement plus their legal fees. Justice served with interest. A year later, life looks a lot different. Bought the North Seattle house. Cash down got me a great mortgage rate. Got promoted to foreman, now leading an 8-man crew on commercial builds. Came with a $15,000 raise and solid benefits. My girlfriend Kate moved in 6 months ago. She works as a nurse at Harborview, deals with enough drama there that she appreciates our peaceful home life. She's good people, pays her own bills, doesn't expect me to bankroll her lifestyle, actually contributes to household expenses without being asked. We split everything down the middle like adults. The house has been a solid investment. Property values in North Seattle keep climbing, and I've been fixing things up in my spare time. New deck, updated bathroom, refinished hardwood floors. Turns out all those years of construction work taught me more than just welding. As for my parents and Tiffany, complete radio silence for months after the settlement. Then last week, they showed up at my house unannounced on a Saturday morning. Kate and I were loading the truck for a fishing trip with Nate and his wife. They arrived at 7:30 a.m. My parents, Tiffany, and her husband Adam. Saw them through my Ring doorbell camera. Felt like someone had dumped ice water down my spine. A year of silence, and now they show up unannounced at my door. Decided to answer it. Not because I wanted reconciliation, but because I was curious what kind of crisis had finally brought them crawling to my doorstep. As soon as I opened the door, Mom immediately started with her victim voice, saying they needed to talk about working things out as a family. I interrupted her before she could get rolling. Sorry, you've got the wrong address. Then closed the door firmly. They rang the bell several more times, then started knocking. I ignored it all. Kate came out of the bedroom asking who was at the door. Nobody important, I said. Let's get going before Nate thinks we bailed on them. They finally left after about 10 minutes. Watched them shuffle back to their car from my Ring camera, desperation in 1080p. Found out from a cousin later that they're struggling financially now. The rental income is gone, Tiffany's husband got laid off from the insurance company, and they've burned through most of their savings trying to maintain their lifestyle. Dad's Social Security doesn't cover their mortgage, and Mom never worked long enough to qualify for much. They came to ask for another loan. After everything they'd done, stealing my inheritance, lying about it for 11 years, using me as their personal ATM, they still thought they could show up at my door with their hands out. Spent the weekend fishing with Kate, Nate, and his wife. Caught enough bass for a Sunday night cookout. Around the fire, I told Kate about the doorstep visit. Do you feel bad shutting the door on them? She asked. I didn't. Not even a little. Some people say family is everything, but what I've learned is that real family doesn't steal from you, lie to you, or use you. Real family has your back. My work crew treats me better than my biological family ever did. When I had the flu last month, 3 of my guys checked on me without being asked. When I mentioned thinking about starting my own business, they offered to come work for me. That's what loyalty looks like. Not guilt trips and manipulation, but people who show up when it matters. So was I wrong? From cutting off the monthly $500 to exposing them at the Memorial Day barbecue, to taking legal action and shutting the door when they came crawling back? Sometimes the people who demand the most from you are the ones who deserve the least. I learned that the hard way. Turns out, cutting dead weight feels pretty damn good.